From Derek Lewis letting everyone know he was feeling a little hot down there, to Colby Covington's cringeworthy rant at Fight Night 111, these are the weirdest post-fight interviews in UFC history. Let's kick things off with a man who has made a career from post-fight interviews.
Derek told me that's all he thinks about. That's it.
That is it. The Black Beast strikes again.
The Black Beast and Knockout King, American UFC heavyweight Derek Lewis. Derek's personality shines through in every interview, but one of his weirdest interviews really sticks out. After his intense match with Alex Volkov, Derek Lewis decided to take off his shorts mid-interview. Interviewer Joe Rogan was left stunned, asked Lewis what the hell he was doing, and Lewis said simply, "My balls was hot." Man, Derek Lewis, ladies and gents, what a guy. You've gotta love him though. I mean, he really is the Joker of the UFC, isn't he? Anyway, Derek's interview might have been hilarious, but this next interview can only be described in one word: grotesque.
Going for Kimura. It is all over! John Jones remains the UFC light heavyweight champion!
So let me set the scene for you. It was UFC 159, and John Bones Jones had just successfully beaten fellow American Chael Sonnen. As Joe Rogan was interviewing Johnny Bones, he noticed that something wasn't quite right. John's toe didn't look okay, and then everyone saw the blood. That's when Joe realized that John's foot was broken. That's right, John had been chilling with a broken foot as if nothing was wrong. But the moment John realized what was up, his face dropped. He told Joe that as soon as the adrenaline wore off, he was going to be in some severe pain. Joe was quick to help the champ and offered him a stool, but as always, Joe had to get his interview. Interestingly, the horrific incident resurfaced in John's most recent fight at UFC 285, when fans noticed that John's toes were heavily taped during the match. And in the post-fight press conference, he explained why he tapes his toes up. Bones said, "So I broke my toe when I fought Chael Sonnen years ago, and ever since then, every day I practice, I tape my toe just to ensure that it doesn't pop out again. The toe is totally fine, but every once in a while, if I pivot on it too hard, it sends the most excruciating pain up my body, and I just never want to compete without my toe taped again." Man, it's crazy how such a freak accident can have such a big effect on someone's career, right? Okay, let's move away from some gruesome interviews and head back to some hilarious ones. And if you're looking for a laugh, who better to watch than Paddy the Batty Pimblett? The man from Liverpool's had a massive impact on the UFC, with his wacky hair, funny accent, and weird way with words. For instance, at UFC Fight Night in July of 2022, Paddy had something very odd to say after his win over Jordan Levitt during an interview with Mike Bisping. After Mike congratulated Paddy on his win, he asked the Batty who he wanted to fight next, and Paddy said, "Who do I want to fight? Mark Zuckerberg. Lad, I'm going to punch your head in. I'm sick of you." Say what? I've got to ask, Paddy, what's Mark ever done to you? Most of the time, fighters, call out other fighters. But not Paddy. Maybe he just doesn't get it. To be fair, Mark's been training in MMA recently, so you might want to watch your mouth, Paddy. Another star who shocked the world with a weird post-fight interview is the notorious Conor McGregor. Conor's always been a smooth trash talker with a knack for coming up with epic one-liners. However, Conor lost his fight due to a freak leg break, and it's safe to say that his dialogue went from smooth to downright weird. If you haven't seen the fight, I'll explain. The match was a highly anticipated trilogy fight with McGregor and Dustin Poirier, and Conor was determined to win, but at the end of the first round he stepped back and his leg folded. No joke, it literally snapped in two. The fight was declared a doctor stoppage, with Dustin winning the bout, and it was clear that McGregor wasn't impressed with the result. When Rogan interviewed Conor, the Notorious had a message for Poirier saying, "Your wife's in my DMs. Hey baby, hit me back up and I'll chat to you later on. We'll be having an after party at the Wynn nightclub, baby." Conor also mentioned that the beef between himself and Dustin wasn't over, and that if he wanted to fight outside, they could. There's only one word to describe this interview: weird. For one thing, who in their right mind would interview a guy who just broke his leg? I mean, McGregor was barely conscious and clearly in agonizing pain, but still, what he said just wasn't okay. You don't bring another man's wife into the beef. Definitely not cool. and disrespectful as hell. Even after the match, Conor tweeted more comments directed at Dustin's wife. So it's clear that the beef between those two hasn't been squashed, and there's still some animosity there. If McGregor can make a comeback, we might just see a fourth fight between these guys. And if you thought that post-fight interview was very weird, wait until you get a load of this one. Back in 2016, Alistair Overeem was defeated by Stipe Miocic in a highly competitive fight that saw both fighters take heavy damage to the head. But Overeem got the short end of the stick and was knocked out cold late in the fight. Despite the fact that he was, brutally knocked unconscious, Rogan still had to be there, mic in hand, to get his interview. And dazed and confused, Overeem said he felt he'd won the fight. Alistair was convinced beyond any doubt that Stipe tapped during a guillotine attempt, and when shown a replay that clearly debunked his statement, he was viciously booed out of the crowd by fans. Clearly, this interview shouldn't have taken place, because Overeem wasn't in the right headspace for an interview and ended up making an absolute fool of himself. Interestingly, this interview actually led to a ban on fighters being interviewed after being knocked out. Good call. The rule's been a good thing for the UFC, but it hasn't exactly stopped weird post-fight interviews from taking place, which I'm grateful for, because they're entertaining as hell. You just need to check this next interview out to understand what I'm saying. At UFC 262, lightweight contender Beneil Dariush won a points decision over Tony Ferguson and decided to do something that literally no one was expecting. In his post-fight interview, Dariush called out Elon Musk. He explained that he hadn't received a Tesla that he'd purchased several weeks earlier, and at the time, everyone thought it was a very weird move. But for Dariush, things worked out pretty well, and Elon responded to the lightweight after the bout and quickly delivered the Tesla to him. Guess sometimes it pays to be a little wacky. Well, things might have worked out well for Dariush that night, but things sure didn't go according to plan for Colby Covington at UFC Fight Night 111. Any fight fan knows Colby as a trash-talking maniac who has no filter, but he hasn't always been able to rile up a crowd. After his victory over Dong Kim at UFC Fight Night 111, Colby started talking a lot of trash, and anticipating boos from the crowd, he cupped his ear to lap it up. Clearly, Colby loves to be hated. However, one thing that Colby didn't think through was the fact that the fight was held in Singapore and most of the fans couldn't speak a word of English, so no one in the crowd reacted to him. Confused, Colby proceeded to run through the rest of his interview in an incredibly awkward fashion, which made for one of the weirdest post-fight interviews we've ever seen. So there you have it, ladies and gents. From Colby's cringeworthy rant at Fight Night 111 to Derek Lewis letting everyone know he was feeling a little hot down there. Those were the weirdest post-fight interviews in UFC history.